Well, good question. All right, good morning. Let me know, are we recording, Sam? Fantastic. And then if you switch over to the PowerPoint so my clicker will work. Okay. There we go. Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. So Norm's out of town visiting his daughter in Wisconsin, going to see his grandkids and plays and things. And so I've got Sam, one of our wonderful college students, agreed to step in and do the tech part for this. So this gets streamed and recorded. So, all right. So we're continuing our looking at Jesus said what, some of the hard sayings of Jesus. And this week we're looking at Mark 10:17-27, where Jesus says it's difficult for the rich to enter the kingdom of heaven. In fact, maybe almost impossible. That it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. All right. And could someone read this for us?
Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus said to him, why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone. You know the commandments: do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not bear false witness, do not defraud, honor your father and mother. And he said to him, Teacher, all these I have kept from my youth. And Jesus, looking at him, loved him and said to him, you lack one thing. Go sell all that you have and give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Come, follow me. Disheartened by the saying, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. And Jesus looked around and said to his disciples, how difficult will it be for those who have wealth to enter the kingdom of God? And the disciples were amazed at his words. But Jesus said to them again, children, how difficult is it to enter the kingdom of God? It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. And they were exceedingly astonished and said to him, then who can be saved? Jesus looked at them and said, with man it is impossible, but not with God, for all things are possible with God.
All right. So, trying to get a camel through the eye of a needle seems to be a bit of a challenging task. And so Jesus is saying, the rich can't get into heaven. All right, so how do we understand that? How do we deal with this? So we think of rich, we think of people like these three guys, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, and Jeff Bezos. So, Microsoft, Facebook, and Amazon. Who you could put Elon Musk, Warren Buffett, a few of those other kind of people. But they seem to be, those are the people we think of as rich, right? So they're the ones that are going to have a hard time getting into heaven. But worldwide, if you look at, and these numbers are a couple years old, the book quotes numbers from 2018, and I didn't get a chance to update them. But so if you have $4,000, you're in the top 50% of richest people in the world. And if you have $93,000, top 10% of worldwide wealth. So you're all rich, whether your bills or tax brackets say otherwise. So that's part of it, is that one of those challenging things is recognizing how blessed we are materially, and where that places us, even if we don't always feel like we're in that bracket anyway. But on the other hand, as we're discussing this, we also have to remember that there are rich people who are held up as positive examples throughout the Bible. Abraham, of course, talks about him being very rich in livestock, in silver and gold. He's got slaves and flocks and all those sorts of things going around. And then his Isaac and Jacob have a lot too. Solomon's given vast riches by God after he asked for wisdom. Sorry, graphics not small, but it says 12,000 horses, 4,000 stalls for chariot horses. He gets about 25 tons of gold a year. That's a nice, gold IRA for him, right? Hear that advertised all the time. And then gets another 20 talents of gold. Some of that's from Ophir and Sheba. He has 500 gold shields. There's a fleet of trading ships. There's golden goblets. Gets revenues from merchants. He has precious stones. Gets spices, all sorts of things. And of course, some of that's, it's good to be the king. How much of this is national wealth and how much should be counted as his personal wealth. We could probably quibble on a bit, but he's fairly well off is what will summarize that. Job, of course, is wealthy both before and after he goes through what he goes through in his book. 7 sons, 3 daughters, 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 oxen, or 500 yoke of oxen and 500 donkeys, and he has twice that much animal-wise anyway at the end of Job. And he's held up as a righteous example. So we can't, and then Joseph of Arimathea, without whom Jesus would not have a tomb. He's an interesting guy on a number of levels that, that we talk about how all the disciples run away from Jesus, and yet Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, these secret disciples, they're the ones who are brave enough to go and ask for Jesus' body and give him his tomb. The ones who've been following him closely, visibly for 3 years are locked up, but these guys decide this is the time I'm going to show that I'm a disciple of Jesus by doing that. And so kind of recognizing just discipleship can look different at different times too. All right, so Jesus says it's hard, if not almost impossible, for the rich to enter the kingdom of heaven. But we do have some examples of wealthy people held up as positive examples throughout the Bible. But also then recognizing too that Jesus talks a lot about money in his parables, about 17 of 55 or so, depending on how you count them, deal with money in some variety. So Jesus talks about money a lot. Of course, we looked at that. Last week we looked at briefly at the treasure in the field and the pearl of great price. Of course, those are about money and value and things like that. If you're selling all you have to buy a pearl, or able to buy a field with a treasure in it, you're probably not. You're probably pretty well off. But then on the other hand, you have Jesus himself. How does he live out his earthly ministry, his earthly life? Well, foxes have holes, birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay down and rest. So Jesus and his disciples are not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination during his earthly life, but they do have people, the women and others who are traveling with him, supporting him, who seem to be well off enough to do that. And we see that with Paul elsewhere too, that part of how Paul's able to keep going around from city to city is that he meets these people who are willing to support him. All right, any thoughts, questions, comments on any of this thus far? No? Okay. All right, and then kind of going along with the fact that Jesus has no place to lay down his head. He's not rich by any stretch. Paul writing to the Corinthians, which again, Corinth, major seaport. We heard in the epistle lesson for today, it talks about how not many of you were wise by earthly standards, by that bit. But there were some wealthy people in Corinth in the church. But Paul tells them that, for you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that by his poverty you might become rich. All right, and so really what it ultimately comes down to a lot is when the Bible's talking about wealth, it's like we get this from Ecclesiastes, which is again, of course, written by Solomon, who has all that wealth. He's talked about how everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil, that's the gift of God. that if you have wealth and are able to enjoy it, that's a gift of God. If you don't have anything and you're able to enjoy it, that's a gift of God. Now, Paul will talk about how he's able to be content in any circumstance. That he's been rich, been poor, been all these things, and yet he talks about how he's able to be content in all circumstances. All right. So again, money's morally neutral. It's the love of money that's the root of evil. All right.
Well, an extreme example of giving away money is that woman that gave $1 billion to Albert Einstein.
Oh yeah, right. Yep.
In perpetuity now, students won't have to pay tuition without Einstein. Incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I had $1 billion, I'd probably do something like that.
Right. Yep. Yeah. I mean, and that's the challenge. That it's also then it's. I mean, this isn't I guess I don't know. Didn't look into all the details, but it's not necessarily a hugely popular, school before this. But a lot of times people who have money will give it, but with the idea of I'll give it, but you got to put my name on a building, or I'll give, but it looks better if I give to Harvard instead of DMAC, even though my money would go a heck of a lot further if I gave it to DMAC instead of Harvard. Those kind of things. All right. But yeah, so again, that idea that God gives us everything that we have, and we're called to use it well, use it to serve others and further God's creation. All right. All right. So in the book, then it mentions also kind of parries this rich young man who comes to Jesus, says, "What do I need to do?" Jesus says, "Sell all you have, give to the poor, then you can follow me." And the guy goes away because he's got too much stuff. But there's this guy named Barzillai in 2 Samuel who just pops up twice. But he's described as old and wealthy, and he ends up helping King David several times while he's on the run. And then because of this, then when David's on the run from Absalom, so you have to specify which time David's on the run. He spends a lot of his time having made bad decisions and being on the run. But so Barzillai supports David while he's on the run and feeds him and his men. And then afterwards, once David's victorious, then he goes back to Barzillai and, "Hey, since you helped me, let's, I want to give you a place at court now." And Barzillai says, "Nope, thank you. I just helped you. That's all I need." So again, kind of that recognition of giving without it asking in return, of taking what God's blessed you, helping those in need, and then not doing it for recognition. Is kind of one of the lessons then this Barzillai gives us. All right. All right, and then the recognition that no one can serve two masters. That the problem with money, and the problem confronting this rich young man specifically seems to be that you've got two masters. You can't serve God and money. Jesus looks into this guy's heart and says, "Well, okay, the money is taking up a lot of room in your brain and your heart. Get rid of that, and then you can follow me." And apparently that's the case, because the rich young man goes away sad when Jesus tells him to sell everything. So, all right. Alrighty. So any other thoughts on that? Okay, we're a real talking group today. Yes.
I guess I'm going back a little ways here, but I'm trying to figure out what it was about Solomon and Abraham that God condoned the wealth they had. Is it because they used it wisely? Or
Yeah, I mean, so partly because they used it wisely. So why did Abraham and Solomon have wealth, and God counted that? They're held up as a positive example. I think part of it is that they recognize that they're gifts from God. I mean, Solomon especially, if you remember when he becomes king and God appears to him in a dream and says, "Ask for anything, I'll give it to you." And Solomon says, "I want wisdom." And God says, "Well, since you asked for wisdom, I'm going to give you riches and power and stuff as well, even though you didn't ask for those things." So it's kind of that sign of God's blessing, which is also then a part of why the disciples, at least, are kind of taken aback at this response. If you remember back, like scroll all the way back here, that the disciples are amazed when he's talking about how difficult it is for those who have wealth to enter the kingdom of God. And they're exceedingly astonished. Well, why is that? Well, again, you have this idea that if you are materially blessed, that's a sign that you're in favor of, you have God's favor. And if you're not material blessed, then that's a sign you're not in God's favor for whatever reason. And that idea still comes into play sometimes as well in those, we talk about the prosperity gospel as kind of the main example of that. The televangelists that seem to rake in lots of money. Creflo Dollar, that's my favorite one, just because of his name. Who was recently, it's been a couple years now, but he was asking, he needed to get a fourth plane because one of the ones he had was 20 years old, and so he needed a new one. And he comes and does rallies and things, but you only have to pay gas fare for him for his private jet to fly there. You don't have to. He doesn't charge anything else, but gives a sales pitch there and shows. And again, that idea that because you're wealthy, that's a sign of God's blessing, God's favor. And the prosperity gospel makes it explicit. There's times we'll sometimes make it implicit, or that idea that if you're wealthy, you must be smart and blessed and good in all these things, and not recognize that sometimes they're wealthy not because of anything they did, but because of what their fathers did or whatever, and just inherited a lot of money, or they joined a company and it gained money not because they were making decisions, but because of other people, and they get credit, that kind of thing. So that idea again of wealth equaling God's blessings can sometimes we can sometimes still fall into that trap, even if we don't think we are. Sophie, yeah.
I'm thinking about when I don't know the actual verse, but too much has been given, much is expected.
Right, yeah.
And so, but that could be, physical things, right? So it could be your money, but it could also be if you're given intelligence, or if you're given power or strength or whatever it might be, then it's using that to glorify God, right?
Yep.
And then also I was hoping like the idea of, tithing or, giving kind of habitually, which, is, what are the thought of that? Because I was thinking about like the intention of giving, right? Versus just out of habit. And if the Bible speaks to that in any manner.
Yeah, no, good questions, good thoughts. So yeah, first again, to who's been given much is expected, that God blesses us. The time, talent, and treasure seems to be the way stewardship things work, mention things at this point. But God blesses us with these things that then we're called to use for other people. And you might not have all of those at the same time. Some people are very talented at music, so they join in the choir. Other people are talented at tech stuff, so they can keep that going. Those, some of those kind of things. Some people have lots of money, and they can give and be generous that way. And other people, once you're retired, you have a little more time, right? Although sometimes some of you retired people, I hear about your schedules and you're busier than I am. But But then you have more time, so then you can volunteer more. And so, recognizing kind of different, and that those life stages and how God's blessed you and how you can serve God and serve your neighbor. And then we talk about, about tithing, about giving God, in the Old Testament it's 10%. Other times it talks about first fruits. Kind of, and again, that intention, that idea, that recognition that what you have is not yours, but it's God's given it to you for your time on earth, and so giving back to God is a way to recognize that and kind of change your priorities and change your focus again away from focusing on what I have versus what I can give. That's, I think, also one of those things that Jesus is trying to do with this rich young man. All right. But no, good question, Sophie. Don?
I was just one time I was listening to Joel Osteen, and I wondered who this guy was, and so I listened to one of his sermons, and that particular day, it seemed like he was admonishing his people in the audience to try to work hard to please God, and God will bless you with wealth.
Yep. That idea that, Joel Osteen's another one of those prosperity gospel people that if you work hard and please God, God blesses you, and which is apparently an attractive message. He fills, I'm blanking on the name of his church at the moment, but it used to be where the Houston NBA team played. He is able to fill that, and so, but that can create a lot of then heartache and doubt when you're working hard and not giving, and seem to keep working and there's no blessing coming. What's wrong is the struggle that comes, or kind of going alongside that, the televangelists that do the healing stuff. That if you're in perfect health, then you're blessed by God, and if you're not, then something's happened. But let's bless you, and I'll heal you, and that'll work. But then the challenge is, of course, then what happens if the healing doesn't come? And things, and again, that the doubts that come there, and the recognition instead that God, Jesus did miracles and did healings, but he didn't, do that, wasn't able to do that for everyone, but instead solve the problems of sin. That we're, as Christians, Jesus and his disciples all underwent persecutions and challenges, and didn't have much, and so that being called to follow God is not a guarantee of earthly blessings. So, but no good thoughts. All right. Okay. All right. All right. So, how does it feel to know that you're rich compared to much of the world's population?
Blessed.
Yeah, you're blessed too.
Guilty.
Yeah. And so, that's one of those things that when we talk about things like what we give Cabetta. Now the truck seems to be a whole other ball game, but most of the stuff that we do, we're able to support him for much less than we'd do a comparative thing here in the U.S. just because of various factors there. But the recognition then that we're blessed with money, and that's in some ways how things are happening. That the Western Church may not have as many people, but still tends to have a decent chunk of money, and so giving it to these growing third world churches and supporting them is a good way to do that and recognize that too. All right, how can wealth be a barrier to faith?
You think you're earning it instead of it being a gift from God.
Right, yeah, so you get in that mindset of you think you've earned it, or you're earning it instead of being a gift from God, right? What else?
Satan has his way of working into your head, so you don't do what you should be doing.
Yep, no, Satan works into your head in a couple ways. Either A, because I have this wealth, then I don't need God because I can take care of myself. Or B, in order to get wealth, it doesn't matter what God says, that getting wealth's more important, and if I'm a little morally gray on some of those areas, then that's okay too. Yep, got on my own. Yep, those.
It can be a continual distraction.
Continue, yes.
Getting sucked down the dark hole of distraction. I have to make a comment about the most recent super wealthy person that comes to my mind is Taylor Swift.
Okay,
And
yeah.
it's a continual disappointment to me that I haven't ever heard about anything she's done to fund a research program or to help a certain community of something or other, or built a hospital somewhere. I mean, she has a platform. That's the thing. All these extremely wealthy people, they have a platform to be a witness.
Right, yeah. That's kind of, going along with the wealth tends to have that big platform. You get the people. It's your Paris Hilton. Those people who are famous for being famous, or for being the kids of who've inherited things, and then that's why they're famous. Or you can watch the Real Housewives of any number of places where these fabulously wealthy people spend all their time fighting with each other over little things instead of doing that. But and sometimes that happens because we don't always hear all that they're doing. They're donating to other things, that we hear only rarely of, oh yeah, that football player donated money and visited the kids in the hospitals, or whatever, those sorts of things. So again, that people who've been blessed by wealth should be working on being generous, and that's not always the case as much as it should be.
I thought, was Patrick Mahomes, when they had that shooting in Kansas City, this is not about money.
Right.
But they asked him about his comment about it, and his only comment was a sentence, "I'm praying for Kansas City." And I thought that was a huge deal, and I actually was almost surprised that the networks ran that.
Yeah. So, and then I think he or the Chiefs might have ended up covering medical bills for some of the victims too. But again, some of that stuff we hear about, some we don't. Use your platform well. All right. What's the fundamental difference between the rich young man from Mark 10 and the Barzillai, the guy who helps King David without expecting any recognition?
Well, the guy in Mark 10, his money was more important than anything else.
Right.
And Barzillai just didn't want any recognition.
Yep. Yeah. So guy Mark 10 is, well, I have money, that's important, I'm going to keep that. Whereas Barzillai, well, the money is a gift from God, I'll use it to support King, the king, and then from there, but don't expect any recognition or anything in return. Yeah. So kind of that attitude of, why do I have this? Is it to bless me, or is it so I can bless others? Yep. What does Jesus mean when he talks about cares of the world and deceitfulness of riches?
One thing I was thinking of is there's an international I was visiting with, and we were talking about, I can't remember the exact question, but his answer was, wealth equals success.
Yep.
And that was his goal.
Right.
And I think that's part of the deceitfulness of riches, because he can gather all the wealth, but it may not make him feel, when will he know that he has enough? That he
I think that's the challenge. I mean, with some internationals and with us, we think we will be happy when we have enough, but we never seem to get to the point of having enough. There always seems to be more we can want or think we need or think we have. Well, we've got this much stocked away for retirement, but I wish I had more. That kind of thing. Or, as college students looking for jobs, do I want the one that pays more, or do I want the one that gives me better work-life balance, or is in a geographic location that's, closer to my family, or in a, more attractive part of the state, countries, or the world, that doesn't deal with winter. Not that we've had to deal with winter this year. Those kind of things. But yeah, and the idea that wealth makes up for, having to put in all the long hours and things, and then people realizing sometimes that that's not the case. Yeah, Don?
I don't know what made me think of this, but I was in Russia on a conference once, and we were talking about using biotechnology to improve the world's situation, and so forth. And this one Russian executive kind of person stood up and he literally took his shoe off and slammed it on the table like that person did at the United Nations, and said, "You guys in America need to realize that the rest of the world can't live like you live."
Yeah.
I've always thought about that a lot since, how we use resources that might not be available if everybody in the world lived like us. So
That's that challenge of
seeing how rich we really are.
Yeah. All right, so are you in charge of your riches, or are your riches in charge of you, and how can you tell?
I'd like to think that I'm in charge of it.
Okay, yeah, good. Yeah, we like to think we're in charge, yeah. So,
You spend it on yourself or on other people.
yeah. How much you count on yourself versus how much you count on other people, yeah. How can you protect your faith from the negative side effects of riches?
Realize that they are a gift from God,
Yeah.
and also that you don't need, if they're a gift from God, and if you're living your life right, you don't need to worry about getting more.
Yeah.
It will be there. God will provide.
Yeah, so we're recognizing everything's a gift and then trusting that God will provide. Okay? Good. All right. And then what do you think happened to the rich young man? So I meant to look up more detail. There's some apocryphal stories about what happens to him and if he becomes a leader of the early church or not. But I didn't look up those details. But we don't have anything definitive as to what happens to him. But what do you think could happen to him?
All we could hope for is that Jesus planted the seed in his heart, and maybe he thought about it later. Maybe as he got older, he realized that all those riches were making him feel good about himself. I don't know.
Yeah. So just as he rejected Jesus at first doesn't mean that's his final answer. And that, as time goes on and he realizes his wealth is not as protective or it's not as worthy of his trust as Jesus is, that he might change his mind. So, all right. And kind of going along with that, is Jesus' advice to the rich young man general or specific? Meaning, does it apply to all of us, or was he just talking to him? Do you need to go sell all your stuff, give to the poor, and then follow Jesus? Something to ponder. But that's also another challenge, another thing as we look at these challenging words of Jesus, that sometimes Jesus is talking just to specific people, specific situations. And so we know that this guy's wealth was what was keeping him from following Jesus. So that's what he needs to get rid of. The rest of us might have different stumbling blocks, different things that interfere with our faith walk. And so recognizing how we can get rid of those too. So, alrighty. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, oh, Lois, yes.
One comment I had to make about the question before this last one. What do you think happened to them? And that is, sort of the overview in my mind is that it's a continuous battle. There's a spiritual struggle that goes on forever, and the only way you can stay strong on the inside is to be in a body of believers that are wrestling with all this, to be reading your Bible and be memorizing Bible verses, because it's not, like we're deciding to fund a research program or build a hospital ourselves, but we make individual decisions. Oh, I'm going to completely, redo the inside of my flooring on my house instead of doing X. We make those decisions every day, which is what I think this is talking about.
Okay, yeah. So there's all the decisions we make every day, and that recognizing that that's part of a community of believers, and that helps us make better decisions. And then, of course, be able to receive forgiveness when we don't make good decisions. And also recognize that we look at this again as kind of a one-time thing, but it would be an ongoing decision of how he uses his wealth and what he does. But again, we talked at the beginning, Nicodemus comes and questions Jesus, but isn't willing to do anything until Jesus dies. Same with Joseph of Arimathea, who's, disciple, but secret, so we don't always know for sure, too. So, yeah, Jan.
None of us was going to go sell all of our possessions.
Right.
And live on the street.
Yeah.
None of us, but it's just to make us think, to change our priorities.
Yep, make sure we reevaluate our priorities and trying to get more in line with what God's given us. So, all right, great. Great, thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.